said, my name is Abacus, Capalini, Chris Luchs in real life, and with me today is my co-presenter Kavon Zenovka. And Kavon, you can go ahead and kick us off.
Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. We put the theme song "I'm Only Happy When It Rains" by Garbage in the chat just to get you into the mood. And the reason why we put it there really is because, you know, I love emo from the 90s. No, only kidding. The reason is because kind of our topic is something that you don't see in a lot of sessions, any kind of educational sessions. Educational sessions, especially the things we're seeing right now, are all about best practices and all about how do you put things online and how do you make it easy? How do you make it easy for faculty? How do you make it easy for instructors? And what we're going to be talking about is kind of the value of hard. I want to thank everybody for attending this session. It is designed for difficulties and disorienting dilemmas. We're going to be putting some things out. We'll have some space for you to get into any kind of conversation that you would like. And what should be showing up on the HUD, it should be showing that if you wanted to look at our slides, feel free to look at the slides there. And so I'm going to ask, and go ahead and type in chat if you want, how is everybody? How's everybody holding up? Super. Okay, okay.
Excellent.
and I was going to say, is one of our friend guildies and colleagues, Jerry Butchko, out here? Because he sent us this wonderful thing about, like, what was it earlier last week about how those of us who play MMOs, we're in virtual worlds, we do things online, we're remote, we've been preparing for this forever, and that we're ready for this. Okay. I will tell you guys, we had absolutely no foresight about anything like this happening. So if we had known this was going to happen, we might have done a different presentation. But we still want to put this. We still want to go and put this forward. So how many people are currently working remotely? You can just type a Y into the chat. Pretend like you're a gamer and you're just not going to expend the energy. So all you do is type Y. You don't even bother with yes, because that's just too much work, right? Yes, perfect. By the way, it works really good with students also.
Buckland can't break the habit. Just type a yep.
Yeah. These verbose people, don't they know? Okay. Now I'm gonna ask that you can type a Y or an N. Okay. And this might differ depending on people. How many people, prior to like a month ago, were told that the work that they're doing couldn't be done at home? So yes, if you were told that you couldn't do it home or remotely, and a no, an N if like, oh no, it's okay. I was always working from home. I'm saying yeses and nos. Back and forth, which is absolutely great because yes, we're finding out we can do these things now. Okay, so on to the next slide, and Chris and I are in a separate room, so I'll be going and on the next slide a lot. Okay, so this was one of my favorite tweets from this week. I'm throwing it up there just to give us something to think about, because you might be seeing the hashtag pandemic pedagogy a lot, and what we're going to be suggesting today isn't pandemic pedagogy. What we're going to be suggesting is things that stretch your students for deeper learning. But I really wanted to put this out here because of especially the hashtag that that Dr. Love, great name by the way, that Dr. Love put out here, and the hashtag is hashtag dreaming beyond coronavirus 19. And that's something that I think we really need to be doing. Okay, we're here in our virtual world. Look at how many people are around and attending this. Okay, now this is a session that's very similar to almost a face-to-face session. But we can do so much more using these kind of platforms than in discussion boards. And I was going to say for everybody for this week, and go ahead and pull up a Google a Google Doc and take notes, or use that old thing called a paper and pencil, and go ahead and feel free to write notes. There are things that you're going to be experiencing like these next couple weeks, whether it's like, why aren't there more people here in Second Life? And by the way, great response here. That you're going to want to take out. Take screenshots. Please share these things out. So slide 3, Chris. Okay. Now there's some common hashtags, and feel free to grab any of those. And by the way, full disclosure, this is my advisor. I'm going through a doctoral program. This is my advisor. This is a great thing that he put out this week. But think about what hashtags can go on to Dreaming Beyond, COVID-19, and please send these out, and please send them out everywhere. Okay. So, and the reason why is also, I was going to suggest, if you want to, go ahead and take a screenshot of, if you're in a learning management system, of maybe what a discussion looks like versus what something like this looks like, and compare them both, and let people start seeing that. So slide 4, please, Chris. And the other part of the intro that I will get to very quickly. Next slide, Chris. Perfect. Now, this is the part that we're going to be getting to. Chris and I use popular culture to teach a lot, and so this is popular culture, sci-fi, biopunk, and a Netflix reference. And by the way, when I teach my students online, I always pick some series on Netflix or some current movie, and I just use it as a theme throughout the semester. So this character here, first of all, anybody watching Altered Carbon on Netflix? Again, you can do the why. Oh, I got an of course. Yeah, because why might not be enough, right? Okay, perfect. And if anybody has an N for no, it's okay. You still have time to do this. Okay. This is one of the supporting characters in the series, and his name is Poe, as in Edgar Allan Poe. And he is the AI that runs a hotel called the Raven in a futuristic San Francisco. Okay, and in the first episode, there's some jokes and some references made to that hotels with this kind of AI that he has are like stalker girlfriends. They're clingy and they're constantly checking up on you, and they try to anticipate your every wish and thought. But he's like one of the best characters in the Netflix series. The book doesn't quite do him, but this was a quote, and I just wanted, for these times, that we're dealing with right now, I just have to refer to his quote, impractical things in the tumultuous hellscape of a world that matter most. And while he says a book, a name, chicken soup, they help us remember that life is to be savored. And I just wanted to say I hope everybody's doing that now. Now, next slide. The other reason I'm bringing this up is because May and June, Chris and I and our other colleagues will be looking at disorienting dilemmas and deliberate difficulties for educations as we do the Metagame Book Club on this Altered Carbon trilogy. Okay, next slide. So we're going to really get started now. So feel free, like I said before, jot down your thoughts and share either in discussions. We're really good. We can walk and chew gum, so we can look at discussions and read them. We can use discussions and read them and incorporate them in. And the hashtag that's being used is VWBPE20, but feel free to look for others. And next slide, please. So my next question is, how many of you have read the book Ready Player One? Or seen the movie? Either one's okay. Okay, so for those of you who haven't seen it, the beginning of the scenes is really this senior in a high school who goes to a fully online class that's done fully in a virtual world. And the reason we're putting disorienting dilemmas, and you could go to the next slide, Chris, is we're going to ask you to start thinking about the books and the movies that show us disorienting dilemmas. And Lisa only reads this for research and work. Oh, me too. Absolutely. It's the only time I would ever read anything like that. And here are some of the other examples that we just put up of some of the things that we've done, and some of the other things that other books that are great to be looking at or reading or rewatching right now. Ready Player One, Ender's Game, Altered Carbon, as we already said. Oh, and The Martian, really good, especially like The Martian's all about science and math rock, exactly what we need right now. And next one. Okay, and we even went ahead and did this. In 2018 we did Ready Player One, and we did Ready Player One in 2015 because we really liked exploring it. And Chris, I can go ahead and turn it over to you, so you can start talking a little bit about why we decided we needed to start looking at, researching, and talking about disorienting dilemmas and deliberate difficulties. And that's quite the alliteration. Okay. And Snow Crash. Thank you, Meta.
All right. Thank you, Kate. So whenever we were approaching VWBPE, one of the things we thought about is sort of what session do we want to look at? And as the theme was stellar, one of the things we started looking at is, so what was common about the different things that was common about how we approached our really cool objects and the really cool things that we did, and what was it that really sort of made things special for us? And one of the things we found was it was really sort of when we pushed beyond what was our normal, what was our everyday, what was our status quo. And so really one of the things that we see is, for us, we teach online at a community college, and really a lot of our focus is looking at universal design, user experience. So we focus a lot on accessibility and user design, user experience design. That's really sort of our gold standard. Um, Really, it's also meeting along with all the other standards. So anyone who's worked in higher education definitely probably totally understands all the different standards and regulations and creditors, all the stuff that's going on right now with the various COVID-19 responses that everyone's trying to manage, and making sure competencies still meeting everything else I've had. So one of the things that we look at is universal design. And so the definitions that are up here, for those that aren't familiar with universal design or user experience design, and also put the links at for those that want them. And so really one of the things we see as we design courses is that accessibility is really front and center. And so sometimes we as educators are guilty of really focusing on just making sure things are just accessible. We really focus on that. And we're just so focused on trying to make sure everything's accessible that we really don't spend time looking beyond just making things accessible. And so what happens is there's a general lowering of cognitive skills. There's a general simplifying of the interface and the navigation. It's not because of accessibility. It's just we try to do things, we try to simplify things, try to go ahead, and we try to meet all of the various requirements that are out there. And of course, sometimes what you run into is going ahead and looks like some things are cutting in and out. So hopefully the voice is back now. All right, and sometimes what happens is we erroneously misconstrue accessibility to be the ceiling and not just a natural part of design. Accessibility is something we always should be doing. It's one of the fundamental tenets of universal design. And so what happens is it's not something that should be our ceiling. It's something that should be just a natural part of what we do. And so that's sort of what guided our question and led to the following question. So as we approach learning, we needed to remember How do we assess or scaffold higher level cognitive skills and expectations while still achieving our user experience design and accessibility standards? And so this is what we're going to go ahead and use as a guiding question for the rest of our talk. So this sort of how we got to this presentation and moving forward. And I'm glad the voice is coming over well. Thank you very much. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Kavon to talk about the rest of the key terms and the key.
Okay, so we're gonna go fast with this one. So Chris, be ready to click. And Chris told me already. What did you say, Chris? That there's a global cooldown on the slides, from what you saw.
There's a little bit of a cooldown between Speakeasy and the slides, and since we have Speakeasy key, when you go off script, you still have to wait for the Speakeasy to catch up.
Okay. Well, this one should be quick. Okay, so look, we think there's no better place to discuss and design or build disorienting dilemmas and deliberate distractions than where we are now, which is Second Life. Okay, or OpenSAM. Or one of our favorites is World of Warcraft. Sorry, there's just so many great things that can happen there. Other people's favorite is something like Minecraft. And actually, I know you're going to think this is a little funny, but Animal Crossing is now starting to go more and more sandbox. I'm actually talking with my students about how they're making it so that there's almost like an easy Photoshop thing. And we're actually talking about like sandboxing Animal Crossing. So let's we're just going to go over some of the terms really quickly, because the reason why is because somebody always asks, when I'm having to put things forward and trying to convince people to do crazy, out of the box things that haven't been seen, say in a department, that what we're seeing is often that research actually helps us. So go ahead and take a look and feel free to read this. And the theory that we're going back to is transformative learning. And transformative learning actually dates back from like the late 1970s. And what this paradigm looks at is how can you take a critical lens to things? How can you bring a critical consciousness to things? How can you look at things differently than perhaps in the mainstream does? and a shout out to Beth. I totally agree. People are doing Animal Crossing for the clothes and the design possibilities. People are going into Animal Crossing for that now, which is actually great. So next slide, please, Chris. For transformative learning theory, there are actually 10 phases or steps to it, and the one that we're really looking at is this first one, this disorienting dilemma. How when students come in to, whether it's a virtual world or an online classroom or a face-to-face classroom, how do you trigger really an experience that does not fit with their pre-existing structure, that allows them to have critical self-reflection after this? And this is really what I'm doing my doctoral research on. I'll let you know when I get to the dissertation phase. But especially in virtual worlds, unless you're using an avatar or character that is exactly like you face to face, you can develop a disorienting dilemma for people really easily. So Chris, next slide. And here's a question for you guys, for everyone here. And you can tell what part of the country I'm originally from when I use words like "use guys." But think about it for a minute. How often have you ever experienced a disorienting dilemma in a virtual world? Do you always feel comfortable here? Okay. Now think about it in educational settings. Have you experienced that in educational settings a lot or not? Bethany, I agree. Discomfort is part of learning. Also, how are we designing educational experiences? And I have to go back to, I am seeing a bias right now that is going back to what Chris is talking about. And it's not about accessibility, it's about ease, okay? And not just navigation ease, but how do we get students through this content as quickly as possible? It does not. So to Sue Nacht, the theory doesn't really talk about technology. There's a couple articles out about technology, and it doesn't really talk about virtual worlds, and it doesn't talk about games, and it doesn't talk about avatars. Okay, the theory hasn't really been brought in for experiments or any kind of real grounded, some kind of grounded theory to study. So this is an area that is ripe for us to do the studying. Okay, so next slide, Chris. So the other thing is, what about a desirable difficulty? Think about if your education ever has any of that. And next slide, Chris. When it comes to desirable difficulties, the research actually shows that when you make things easier in the short term, which if you're doing students, it means they get good grades. Okay, and also if you're talking, so better grades on initial testing, but the knowledge in the transfer, the knowledge doesn't keep and the transfer doesn't happen. And so it's also, if you're doing, say, training rather than teaching, again, that, they come out of that session and they've hit the checklist. Again, the transfer doesn't happen and the knowledge doesn't stay. And yes, what we're talking about for eyesight, when we're talking about design for ease of use, what we're talking about is ease of use for navigation, not a problem. But when it comes to the actual learning and the actual tasks, the performance, we're talking about maybe not making it so easy. That there's actual reasons why to make it hard. Okay. So any questions before we go to our next example? And Chris, you can hit that slide that basically says that. Okay. And Chris, you can cue up the next slide. Seeing if there's any questions. It doesn't look like it at this point in time, but you can cue the next one. So this is the example that we're going to show you, because we did one in Second Life that we think is a really good example of disorienting our students and deliberate difficulties. So go ahead and hit the next slide, Chris. Okay, we did this. So we did this in an Eastern religions class, and we were asked to come up with a solution for the professor, and we kind of made it harder. So next slide. So one of the things that the instructor wanted was the concept of liminality. So Chris, you can hit the next slide unless the global cooldown is on. And the state of being liminal, it relates to a transitional stage or process. So it's not giving the student definitive answers. And the students in Bartolo, actually what they were looking at was the reincarnation process. And for a lot of Western students who have never, whose background was Judeo-Christian, looking at the liminality of reincarnation was something that just wasn't getting across in essays and coming across in the students' online discussions. So what they decided to go ahead and do, what we decided to do was to create a disorienting dilemma. So next slide, please. So in the simulation, okay, so the person on the right is the instructor. The instructor played the role of a llama. The student, on the other hand, was given an avatar that looked like Gandhi, basically. basically, the person was bald, male, wearing white, like kind of makeshift cotton outfit, and that was the first part of the dilemma. Rather than being able to pick an avatar that they liked, rather than being able to pick a and being able to adjust that avatar, they came into the simulation in an avatar that was not of their own choosing. It was ours, and that was the first part of it. Now, the next part of this disorienting dilemma, the next part that we designed for, was they met with the peaceful deities. Now, the peaceful deities, beautiful people, um, all they do, the peaceful deities do, is whisper and tell everyone how fantastic they were in their life, and tell them, how they should be praised, so they got a full force of how wonderful they were, and all these avatars acting really nice towards them. And we had characters playing these avatars, and we hooked things up so the audio would loop. But it was just this. We put them into this wonderful experience with the peaceful deities, and then next slide, please, Chris. Then they met the wrathful deities. Then they basically met demons who use the collision part of Second Life to push them around, to tell them that they were horrible, that they were selfish. So the exact opposite. And yeah, when students are coming in and are getting the real peaceful deity experience, and then they get the wrath deity experience. Now, we never did anything more than the walk on collision, but still, it was quite the experience. Oh, we did also have the demons flying all around them and going in and circling them, stuff like that. Okay, so after that disorienting part of this, we go to the next slide where, and at this point in time, the students aren't in but for 10 minutes. The next slide, please, Chris. So then this was the wrap-up part that took about 5 minutes. And the wrap-up part was Lord Yama. And Chris always played Lord Yama because Lord Yama is, and you'll see from the notes, he's kind of like the comptroller of the afterlife, deciding if you were good or bad and weighing your soul and things like that. So they would go in there, Lord Yama looking very fierce, and Lord Yama's minions looking very fierce also. And then they basically, we would keep sending them a note card to choose what realm. And the realm was all in Tibet. It was in Tibetan, so our students didn't know the words, so they just basically randomly picked one, and then they got sent to one of the 6 realms. And next slide, please, Chris. And so these were 6 compartments where anything from the heaven realm to the human realm to this is the animal realm, where they ended up as their avatar with a bunch of huge chickens in a basically in a chicken coop. And like we always said, it was up to the student to interpret whether they were a chicken in there or whether maybe a worm that got thrown in there. Yes. Okay. Thank you, Sue, for saying that. So our idea here was the students went through this. Okay, instead of just reading an essay from the book, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which was what was happening before that, they went through a series of disorienting dilemmas that made them think beyond their preconceived notions. So, beyond their preconceived notions, first of all, that reincarnation, they didn't get reincarnated as themselves. They weren't there as themselves. And that relates to Buddhism, with the Atman is Brahman and Brahman is Atman, which is a discussion that they had to do. Then they had to discuss in the discussions. Now, you have to think about just this 15-minute experience was able to last half a semester's worth of discussions. It was able to fuel that much. And the discussions, the essays we read, they were rich. They students said that they heard sounds of being whipped with Lord Yama, and we're like, we didn't have whipping audio in there. I don't know where they got the whipping audio, but we didn't have it. So here's the thing: transformative learning experiences. Sometimes we have to design for things that are difficult or disorienting. And so now I'm going to give it back to Chris. So it's on to you now, and I think you're going to have to go fast.
Sure. We've got about 20 more minutes to go and a few more slides. They'll go pretty quick. So now it's time to go ahead and look for a group discussion. So feel free to go ahead and chat. And one of the things we would like to go ahead and pose to you all are, now that we've heard some of the information about disorienting dilemmas and desirable dilemmas, difficulties, what are some of the things you're thinking about that you'd want to experiment with? So feel free to type some of those ideas in chat. If you'd like to share. It's a good one, Jazz. How to navigate your scholarly research. Yes. Find that there's diversity. Very good. Unfortunately, Katie's college stopped funding their Second Life sim.
And I think we do have to build it in OpenSim. It was too much fun not to. Yeah. So yes, that goes on. That goes on to the project of something that we'll do in the future. And I see leadership development programs. Yes, think it. Okay, we know what's happening in the world. Think about. I mean, disaster policy normally does these kinds of simulations. I'm saying there should be more of these. Okay, and I happen to see some people here who like Doc Linda. I'm gonna have to think about who that is, but I think she might have designed something like Disoriented Dilemma before. And I know Lear designs Disorienting Dilemmas. Okay, and I'm seeing Delightful there too. So I know there's other people here who design for that, and I think that that's something that we have to put forward. That's something that we have to go ahead and put forward for going, look, this is what we can do here. And Chris, what was the thing that you like to say? We can't kill our students in real life, so and bring them to the afterlife.
Exactly. That was it was funny because whenever we first started working on BARDA, one of the things that we did was we got some release time for from an innovation grant from the college, and one of the it was one of the final questions. It was one of those late at night things, and the final question was sort of like, well, what's the justification for why this is important? And unfortunately, it was late at night. We're all tired, and my right out, I didn't have a chance to filter it and write it on my author was like, well, because killing our students would be bad for retention. Because otherwise, that'd be the only way they could go through the reincarnation cycle if they converted to Tibetan Buddhism before that happened, of course. So we obviously put a much better spin on that. But those are the things to look at so there are different pieces to really sort of think about whenever you're going ahead and pulling these possible starting points. For those of you that were still thinking about different ways to get started, here's some different ideas, different places where we've gotten started in the past, actual unsolved cases. In the past, we've used D.B. Cooper. I think actually we've probably presented it at one of the VWBPEs in the past. D.B. Cooper was used for some of these, looking at it for my accounting classes, looking at murder mysteries, looking at puzzles, favorite movie, popular culture, current events. There was talking about leadership, different things like that, disaster preparedness, lots of different things you could use for lots of potential starting points to continue on with. So as we're working through our pieces, one of the big things that we want to go ahead and very cool. It goes to Mark Twain. Nice. Yes, it's very fun. Invisible avatar, interesting. Because then you don't have the visual cues to cue off of. All right, so go ahead and we'll give some time for some questions. So we'll go ahead and go quickly through the last section here. So some things to remember. So as you're considering your design your difficulties and your challenges, and these are some key things to remember as you're getting ready to design. And so the 3 Fs. And you can come up with your own Fs as well. Fun, flow, and Mezirow. So these are things that you've heard and we've talked about. Hard fun. So the fun refers to hard fun. The idea that you get enjoyment from overcoming difficulties, constraints, and challenges. We love the games that enrage us the most. However, there needs to be an intrinsic motivation, a desire for status for performing the task, and/or autonomous constraint satisfaction on the part of the learner. So these are key pieces, and the source for that is that Scientific American article that I just posted. And so this is a really important piece, because if your learners do not have that intrinsic motivation, they do not have that desire, or they don't see that status, or they don't see that, sword in the stone is what the article refers it to. And also they don't have that autonomous ability for that constraint satisfaction, then you start seeing the difference of that hard fun, and they start seeing that and perceiving that in a different. The metagame. This is another example of things that you can leverage as you're looking through and designing. This is something that we do with game-based education. We've done lots of presentations on that in the past. And really, it's an example of the cumulative result of hard fun. I think you probably have to copy the entire link, unfortunately. Probably what it is only copying parts of it. You might need to have to copy the whole URL. Well, no worries. So really it's all the work. So what they're doing is, this is all the videos, this is all the articles, this is what they call theory crafting, this is setting up all the different stuff. And if you haven't heard enough about the metagame, oh yes, if you get rid of the little parentheses, yep. And if you want to learn more about the metagame, you can refer to a draft by my colleague here, Kay. So she provided a bit.ly URL there at the end to look at over the metagame and overlooked educational space, and by Young Bach's book. And then the other thing is, we get lots of cool tools from metagame. So this is an example of the hard fun. So both for the players using it, so players use this to compare their work, to look at their performance, to see what they're doing, and also the players that develop the add-on. So they wanted a tool to go ahead and gauge their in-game output, how they're going ahead and how they're performing. These are the collage of additional sites. The site most people like is Elitist Jerks, just because that's like an awesome name. Talk about your research. And then you also have Icy Games, and then you also have World of Logs, which is where you have that data piece there. And so there's lots of things out there, and this is just dedicated just to one game. This is World of Warcraft. So another theme you see with hard fun is embrace the suck. So you see this is a military term, and this idea is that you accept failures. You accept that there's challenges, and it comes with learning new skills and new techniques. And the rules that need to be successful, overcoming the challenges and difficulties to resolve your dilemma. All those little white things you see on that screen, those are all skeletons. Those are called wipes in gaming terminologies. Those are all people that die. Those are all deaths trying to kill one big boss. And that's a big, huge raid that you see there. So those are all things that are there. In games, this typically involves challenging boss fights, puzzles, gathering special or rare materials. In virtual environments, it's a learning curve. Everyone can remember being able to move around. The first time you tried to walk around in Second Life, I remember folks talking about being naked and alone on Orientation Island. I'm sure there's this web series that someone should create. But then building, and remember building. And this is actually a picture from one of our early VWBPE builds several years ago. Another F is flow, is except mahai, a state of being completely involved in any activity for its own sake. So this could be, again, reading a book, it could be playing games, it could be building in Second Life. A lot of us have lost track of time building in Second Life, or even grading papers. Some of us have lost time, perfecting our line dancing animations. Some of us. Anything where you lose track of time or awareness of your surroundings would be considered flow. These are all things that are there. So different ways you can do. So also, a lot of us spend time on our avatars. How our avatars are perceived, how they're perceived by others. A common complaint of players of World of Warcraft, especially druids. They see ourselves as their humanoid character with their pretty outfit, but the rest of the game sees them only in bear form and just see the backside of the bear. So all matter of perspective. And again, I mean, come on, we've all spent time looking at our virtual selves and changing the way we look. So again, it's developing strategies and tactics, creating different plans, doing a lot of stuff. Yes, your avatar is you. Yes, that's exactly. So there's a lot of different ways to go ahead and solve it. The thing to remember is there's no one solution to the problem. There's lots of different ways to solve a challenge. Last F is Fiero, explored by both Lazaro and Ekman, and it's the enjoyment of a personal triumph over a difficult challenge. So think of it as that fist pump. It's like, yes! You're downing a boss. Creating a group achievement as a guild or as a group of players. And this is it down a little bit. Yeah, I still understand. Or accomplishing individual achievements. And of course, there's always sharing it with friends. Since we are here at VWBPE, nothing would
Okay.
be without.
So what I was going to say is, because I know you have to go through some of these slides, I was going to say, so what what VRO kind of moments have people had lately? I mean, for me, it was getting our exhibition under, the number of prims. And Chris, you can keep going through the slides. Oh, someone better put it there. And while we're pulling up some memories through virtual worlds and Second Life and things like that, what we do want to emphasize is the fact that you can create these kind of experiences, or if you're using a game, you can look for those kind of experiences for students. Okay, you can look for disorienting dilemmas, and you can design for those. You can look for deliberate difficulties to emphasize points that they'll be able to remember past the latest tests. And then you can also go ahead and use like the 3 Fs. The 3 Fs being fun, meaning hard fun, flow, and then Fiero. And we wanted to invite all of you to this next thing. Chris, you take it away.
Sure. Then I'll just hand it right back to you for the next things. So this is our next coming event. So this will be on April 6th, 5 to 6 p.m. For any of you who are nostalgic for WoW Classic, we're going to coordinate an immersive tour of WoW Classic. We've affectionately called it Embrace the Suck, because it is talking about hard fun. There is going to be lots of dying, I expect, a lot of trials and tribulations, and a lot of walking. Because remember, in Classic, you don't get to ride until you're so it'll be fun. So the information is on the program, so make sure you look that up. I'll turn it over to Kay.
Okay, and I just put, because I know we're almost running out of time, so I put a link. We have other slides because we always have too many slides. The other thing is that we mentioned before, and the reason why we mentioned Altered Carbon is because we're going to be doing a book club on it, and while we read the book, we're going to be pulling out, okay, if we were to make this into a sim for students that we wanted students to do, what would be the disorienting dilemmas here? And the book Altered Carbon is all about being put into different forms of carbon or bodies, and taking your consciousness and being put in one to another one to another one. So that's what that whole thing is about. And Chris, you can just click as you have time to hit the rest of these, because I knew we need to clear out of here. But just some other things that we basically have going on, or things that you would like to. This is our exhibit. If you want to go to it, we have way more note cards there. But feel free to join us for that, especially since we're all quarantined now. Oh, and Dale Shepard did make us the Hello Unicorn pink backpack from the Netflix series Altered Carbon. So you can go ahead and pick one of them up there. And along with the Netflix series and the book, there's also now an anime called Resleeved. Go ahead and watch, and keep thinking about this. Well, what is it like to put students in a disorienting dilemma, such as put them in another body? And yes, the backpack is lovely, Jerry. And we'll end up with this quote again from Altered Carbon: is take care of yourself, take care of your students. With everything we're going through, just please remember to think about what's going on. And Chris, we can leave it. We can leave it here, and the rest of it. And like I said, you can check out our slideshow. The rest of it is just basically, you can have a look at the rest of the slides. These were just other things that, shout outs for other things that are happening in virtual worlds and stuff like that we'd like to give a shout out to. But thank you so much, everybody. and I hope you have a great rest of your conference. Thank you.